time running out, ministers from more than 100 nations are working around the clock to reach accords aimed at preventing overfishing of the seas, helping poor nations get their hands on COVID vaccines, and easing the world food crisis. The World Trade Organization hasn't met for almost 5 years and has a new director general in Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, former Nigerian finance minister. Final day of the conference in Geneva, Switzerland, is tomorrow. Dr. Ngozi predicted a rocky road ahead, but she said she was cautiously optimistic that the WTO could reach an agreement on one or even two of the challenging issues facing ministers. From Geneva, Arise Chief Correspondent John Cookson.
Thank you very much. Well, the big issue on the agenda for the World Trade Organization today here in Geneva is fishing subsidies and a curb on fishing subsidies. Now, the problem is that the massive subsidies paid by rich nations like the US, China, and bodies like the EU to fishermen has led to the seas being massively overfished, and scientists have been sounding the alarm about this for a long time. Poorer nations, though, say that subsidies must continue. Otherwise, fishing communities in coastal towns and villages will be absolutely decimated and reduced to poverty if subsidies are cut. Meanwhile, ministers are still trying to come to an accord on two other big issues. First of all, the world shortage of food caused by the war in Ukraine. Now, what ministers want to do is to ease tariffs generally and make markets more open and to bring more transparency to the food system so that the food can start flowing to countries like those in Africa, which import about 80% of their food. There's still no agreement on that, but it's suggested here that one possible accord could be allowing the World Food Programme to buy food tariff-free. This still has to be agreed by all nations attending this conference. There are 103 nations represented by ministers. There's one final item on the agenda to be talked about today to try to get some accord, and that's the waiver of patents on COVID vaccine licenses. Now, countries like South Africa and India want all patents to be relaxed so poorer nations can develop their own vaccines, and not only their own vaccines but also drugs associated with the aftermath and the diagnosis of COVID. That's not going to happen because Western pharmaceutical companies in Western countries say that it's unfair that they've spent billions on developing these vaccines only to give it away to poorer nations. Now, what might be agreed here in Geneva is that poorer nations who have the capacity to develop COVID vaccines be given limited access to patents to produce their own vaccines, but still there's no agreement on that. Now, time is running out. The conference ends tomorrow, and the World Trade Organization still has to prove that it, which was created in the mid-1990s, still has a relevance in the modern world. John Cookson, Arise News, Geneva.